one of the greatest living authors of our time, and were it not for the fact that he writes in Hindi, he would be considerably better known. But today's your chance to get to know him and find out what he's like. His name is Nirmal Verma, and he's my guest. Welcome to the program.
Okay.
Now, they call you the poet of loneliness, the author of unhappiness. Do these journalistic short forms irritate you, or do they also capture something of your literary identity?
Well, they are true, but I sometimes wonder whether these are not too general and too abstract judgments or evaluations of my work. I do feel that loneliness, unhappiness, this remote sense of remoteness and alienation are there in my stories, in my novels, but they are so different from one story to another story. And secondly, they are very deeply grounded in the human situations which I try to dramatize in my stories. On one level, they can be, of course, discussed on very abstract, metaphysical level, that human beings are always very lonely, that Homo sapiens, that to be a human being is to be lonely. Actually, I sometimes feel that if you just think how many hours in a day you are lonely, you are simply left to yourself and to your own devices.
You know, that's very interesting insight that you're revealing there. Tell me something. As you see human beings, both in your works and the people you've got to know and live with, do you find them essentially lonely people, perhaps even unhappy people?
You see, you will be surprised that I saw people in the West far lonelier than in India. At least here they are encompassed by the families, the neighbors, and they feel that there is some cushion behind them. But to be in a park in a European city, I have seen old people talking to themselves, long soliloquies, and if you have the chance to sit beside them, they can tell you the entire history of their past, of their lives. They feel so deeply bereft because of the children have gone, their sons and daughters. And so you see, these peculiar situations in different parts of the world and in different cultures have to be very minutely and sensitively distinguished. And then perhaps you will be able to bring certain concrete examples in your story.
In fact, it's not just that they have to be handled with great discretion and each example is a different situation, but also, as you say, man is a paradox. You write, and I'll quote it, "Man is strange. When he is lonely, he wants to communicate with others. When he is with others, he wants to retreat back into himself."
I think this is a very natural feeling. The fact is that we sometimes get so fed up with the people around that we would like to have a private corner for ourselves. You know, this Virginia Woolf's dream, a room of one's own, is not merely for women, but also for every human being. You see, long ago I read a story by, I think it was by Catherine Mansfield. It was in my school textbook. And the story of Ma Parker, perhaps you remember, that here is Ma Parker, a maid servant whose son has died, and she wants to cry. But, and the entire story is her search for a lonely private corner where she can sit and cry without shame, without any embarrassment. But she can't find it because people are always looking at her, neither at home nor outside. Now this is so common in the Indian households. I have seen my sisters, I mean, if they have to be, if they are sad or something, they have to find the place in a bathroom to go and cry. Because in the house itself, there is so much of a pressure of other people's presence.
But you're saying something fascinating. Man can only be himself when he's on his own. And even if he dislikes the loneliness and it makes him at times unhappy, that's when he is himself.
That's right. That's very right. I very strongly believe in it.
Then tell me something. How much of this paradox, how much of this loneliness, how much of the reaching out that happens in your novels, and often unsuccessfully, is actually you yourself?
Well, I don't think that there's anything directly autobiographical in my novels about my own life or my own experiences. But this is true that as I have interacted with the people around me, I found one thing, that how much technology of information and communication has multiplied and become more sophisticated, but how difficult it has become for a person to say the things which he cherishes most to the other person. This is a paradox, that we can now tell everything through the agencies of information, but what we are, what we suffer, what actually are our real authentic experiences are becoming incapable of being communicated to other people.
You once said of yourself something that echoes what you're saying now. You said, there is a strange thing about me. I never miss anything. I never feel homesick. That suggests not just that you and yourself are complete, but it also suggests a frightening degree of aloofness, of being private.
Well, I think that one can live with oneself. I very strongly believe. I feel not unhappy, but really very enriched when nobody is there to encroach upon me. And I never feel homesick also. I've been for 7 or 8 years in Czechoslovakia, in other countries, and I have seen people, friends, feeling very bad, feeling ill at ease because the food is not of their taste. And I remember an anecdote about a Ceylonese friend of mine in Czechoslovakia who after a week wanted to go back to Ceylon. And the teachers told me, because they thought that Ceylon and India are really one culture, they told me that can't I persuade my friend not to go, because it is a very precious sort of a scholarship which he has been.
But you know, to be happy with yourself means that you have to like the way you are.
No, I won't say that. I never feel happy with myself as I am. I feel so deficient, so inadequate, actually so vulnerable, that if I begin to think about the inadequacies of my existence and my life, I would completely be a moron.
And yet you like being on your own and you never miss anything?
Well, because...
Isn't that a paradox?
Well, I would say that this is one part of my personality. The other part is to reach out, to understand, to be able to put myself in a situation where others are also working, suffering, creating. And this has always been perhaps one of the reasons why I don't miss anything, because I feel so much involved.
But you know, you're so full of intriguing paradoxes. You say you want to reach out to other people beyond your own circumstances, and yet you also say, I feel trapped by the illusions of happiness which we create around us. And that is almost as if you're retreating back at the same time as you're reaching out.
But I don't see any contradiction in between. You know that a certain thing is an illusion only when you test it on the criteria, on the measuring rod of your experiences. And you can't have experiences in isolation. It is only in society with other people in other countries through various events and the experiences you go through.
And when you tested happiness, you found it to be illusory. You found it, in fact, to be worse, a trap.
At one phase, if one type of a happiness seems to be an illusion, you don't lose hope. You feel that you have been disillusioned on this plane, but that doesn't necessarily make you a cynical person. Well, suppose I have faith in something, and I find that the person has betrayed that faith. Does it mean that I will lose faith in the entire humanity? No, this is a disillusionment of a particular situation with a particular person. I think that I have never been pessimistic in that sense of the term in which people use this term.
Then when you say that writing is your way of giving meaning to your world, clarity and understanding to your experiences, what exactly do you mean?
This is really what I very strongly believe. You see, just imagine our impressions are so chaotic. I mean, they do not have any pattern. They just come, they just drop on us like raindrops. And I think at the end of the day, when you look back on how you have spent your day, you will realize no pattern, and yet you feel that you have passed through certain very important experiences.
And so your works, your short stories give that pattern.
I think this is one reason why I took to writing. Writing gave me a chance to have respite, to say, stop, don't rush. Stop at this point and have a still center from which you can look around what is happening to you, what is happening to others.
Writing also then makes the author a bit like God. He can make sense of what, as an individual, as a human being, he couldn't understand.
This is very true. Once I said in one of these conversations that he is a God, and like God also he is invisible. He should be invisible. I think the bad writers are those who try to project their own personalities or egos on their writing. A good writer creates everything and yet gives an impression that it is not he.
But you're also saying that Nirmal Verma understands his life after he's written it. It may not be autobiographical, but nonetheless it's an understanding of the distillation of the experiences.
This is so, yes. I think every story, every novel gives me a certain insight, certain dimension of truth about my own self.
In which case, is your writing a way of bridging the divide between your own world and the outside world, or is it a way of keeping them firmly separated apart?
No, exactly. It is bridging. It is if the two worlds remain separate, then there is no fun. There is no sense in writing. Each story, each novel is again a new attempt to create entirely a new bridge between yourself and the world around, or the reality which is inside you but remains hidden because of various circumstances. Actually, coming in contact with other people is also coming in contact with certain aspects of your personality which had remained covered or invisible up till now.
It's a self-revelation just as much as a communication.
Yes, it is so. It is so.
In which case, those who know you readily acknowledge that you're one of the greatest living authors in the country today, and yet you don't have the same popular recognition as people like Vikram Seth, Amitabh Ghosh or Rohinton Mistry who write in English. Knowing that you're as good, if not better, and yet not having the same standing, does that hurt you?
No, I never think about it, to be very sincere, and I'm not being modest. It has never occurred to my mind that what is my standing in this literary
You're not
situation.
competitive in that sense?
No, not at all. But, and yet, as a general situation, I do feel concerned, not about myself. I'm satisfied once I have written my novel in Hindi, and I don't bother whether it is going to be translated or not. If it is translated, well and good. I will try to help the translator. But if it is not, I'm happy with my own audience in India. But after having said this thing, let me add that I feel very depressed and distressed by the situation that far better writers writing in Malayali or Telugu or Bengali or Hindi are not so well known as the writers with lesser literary talent are so easily available because they write in English.
This is the penalty of the language barrier.
And this is a social question. I mean, you can't blame writers either on this side or that side. I think blaming is the wrong thing. But this is a social situation in which they are operating.
Let's take a break. I want to come back and talk a little bit more about the person who makes sense of his own world each time he writes about it. That's the subject in part 2. See you in a moment's time. Welcome back. My guest is the Hindi author Nirmal Verma. Let's talk a bit about yourself. You were born and brought up in Simla in the 1930s when the Raj was in full bloom and Simla was the summer capital. What was that like?
Oh, it was... it is very vividly imprinted in my mind, and there are some scenes which recur again and again. You know, the other day I was seeing Satyajit Ray's film Pathir Panchali, and there was this Scottish band, you know, in the village. And I was reminded that people of our generation, Satyajit Ray, me and others, we remember the same things which haunted us, because in Shimla on Saturday afternoons, when we shall return from the school, we shall wait, sit on the benches and look at this Scottish band orchestra going up and down with these kids, and it is something which was absolutely out of this world. We had never seen this sort of a music, this sort of an orchestra, this sort of dresses. But there were negative sides also. You see, the schools from which we used to come, they used to be the British students, the English students, who would tyrannize us, who would throw stones at us, who sometimes scuffle, and it used to be a terror to be caught.
You actually had young British students of your age throwing stones at you?
Yes, and they were protected by their khansamas, their Indian servants, and we were bullied by. And sometimes I would be wondering that I who go at home and read Oliver Twist and David Copperfield, who were as tyrannized by their circumstances, are these the same British boys as we watch or encounter in Shimla? These were some of the, but again there were some other aspects of my experience. You know, we would sit on Saturdays in the Havaghar, what's called the Havaghar. You know, in Shimla they have made this under the shed, some benches you can
up
sit.
On the famous ridge.
And can you imagine that the girls and would be going to White Flower Hall in Mashobra for dances, for ballroom, and with their beautiful dresses, and we would see their, look at their legs, and we would not believe that they can be so white. We would discuss with one another, can they be so white, or they have put something on them?
You couldn't get over the fact that young English girls could have such wonderful white legs.
And 4 rickshaw-wallahs driving such fragile women in the rickshaw. This was another bizarre.
It was a sort of Shangri-La type society,
yes.
Part dream and part illusion and part horror.
That's right.
But you had a macabre streak in you as well, didn't you? I gather as a child your favorite pastime was pretending you were dying.
Yeah. Well, this was something just to see what are the most beautiful experiences of my life. And I would try to recollect them quickly, because I knew that there's only very little time is left for me to live anymore on this earth. So I will think of all that has happened to me in this world, my best, my most beautiful, my most cherished moments and memories. I think it was just a game with myself.
But a game that most children of that age would never think of playing. Was this, in fact, the author in you beginning to emerge precociously?
I was not very much of a child. I mean, I was 10 or 11 years. I was 11 years old at that time when I wrote my first story for the school magazine. So it was not so young. I was not so young.
Except that most people, when they write stories at 10 and 11, would consider those to be very childish. You're sounding almost as if that was the beginning of Nirmal Verma, the author.
Oh no, it was just a game. It was just a competition. I had this bet with a friend of mine in the class that we should write a story and bring it on this particular day. But unfortunately, on that particular day, this boy didn't appear, and then he never came. And then I heard from people that he has died. So the first attempts of story writing in my life are haunted by this shadow of death. The first death which I witnessed was a very close friend of mine.
The shadow has been there right from childhood.
This has been there, and I don't think it is accidental. There is something very strangely
fate, a hand of God?
Because death has, when I wrote my first novel about Shimla, this red tin roof, lal tin ki chat, this motive of death recurs there again and again. And this also not deliberately, but when I reread the novel, I was struck by this.
Do you believe in such coincidences, these hands of fate?
I wonder at them. I'm baffled by them. I don't believe or disbelieve, but I feel baffled.
It's part of the mysteries that you try
Yes,
to
yes.
understand. In 59, you left India and went to Czechoslovakia. They say that this was a turning point in your life. Would you accept that?
Yes, I will say that. I think Czechoslovakia was for me a window, a sort of a threshold to go into another world, into another experience. And Europe, about which I had only read in the novels, Thomas Mann and Camus and Russian authors and Hermann Hesse. Here was a country which I could see with my own eyes. I still remember when I was going to the Moscow airport at night, midnight, I look at the wood, and foolishly I thought that this is the same wood in which Tolstoy novel War and Peace, and the hero was the first time fell in love with Natasha. Now see the crazy fantasies of my life, because coming to Europe for me was to relive the life which I had lived in my books, in my novels.
Except that now you were living it in reality.
Yes.
You spent a lot of your time in Czechoslovakia translating authors like Václav Havel and Milan Kundera.
This is why I went there. This is how I went there. I was invited by the Oriental Institute to initiate a program of translations from Czech into Hindi.
But did those translations influence you in a literary way? Has Nirmal Verma, the author, been conditioned by the work he did as a translator?
I don't think so. They influenced me as a writer, but they extended my area of experience. For example, reading Karel Čapek was a great experience. How the inner depths and secrets of life can be easily change your life is something which I learned from Karel Čapek and his book, An Ordinary Life. So these are the small things which I learned, but not stylistically. They didn't make any impact upon me.
2 years ago, when you got India's greatest literary award, the Gyanpith, you said, "I thought such awards were meant for other people." Was that an indication of genuine surprise, or a small sign that perhaps you should have got it earlier?
No, not at all. Not that I should have got it earlier. I think I always thought that prizes and awards always make me very self-conscious, and I never feel that they are meant for me. It is just like a child when he is given a sweet, he first looks at the parents, whether he should accept it or not. So this sort of a tendency still persists in me, and it is not false modesty, nor it is anything else. It is simply a natural reaction to that a thing you have written in isolation, in loneliness for months together, can have some recognition, also gives me some solace and some assurance that yes, it was not all nonsense, but it is also this sort of a feeling that I am not adequate for it.
Nirmal
I don't
Verma,
deserve it.
a pleasure getting to know you.